Welcome. In this lesson, we're going to be discussing upgrade to Vue 5.0. So in this lesson, we're going to cover version compatibility with Vue 5 and previous versions of Vue to help understand what pieces need to be upgraded in which order and how quickly they need to be upgraded after one another. Then we'll talk about the different steps to the upgrade. There is a defined sequence in which you want to upgrade the components, and we'll discuss each one in detail. Then I'll go through and show you, in a live demo environment, the upgrade to each individual piece. So let's get started. Starting with the version compatibility. I provided the link here to the Vue 5 upgrade guide, which contains tons of great information, which we'll cover most of here. But there are some edge cases that we won't cover that are covered in that document. Let's start by looking at this chart, which I pulled directly out of the upgrade guide, that shows the different compatibilities for the different components of Vue. Most pieces of the Vue infrastructure will be compatible between versions 4.0 and up with version 5.0. But I'd like to point out a few specific places where there are limitations or no compatibility. First, the connection server working with Vue Composer 2.6, 2.5, or 2.0 does have some limitations. Specifically, if the two aren't matching in version, you won't be able to create new linked clone desktops, recompose, rebalance, or refresh them. Users will be able to connect to desktops. You will also be unable to edit the settings for the linked clone pools. Given these limitations, it's highly recommended to upgrade the Vue Composer piece as quickly as possible after upgrading the connection server pieces. Next is the Vue Agent 5.0, which has no compatibility with the connection servers of 4.x or the Vue Composer versions from 2.0 to 2.6. Given these limitations, we'll want to upgrade our connection servers and our Composer servers before upgrading the agent. Vue Composer 2.7 has some limitations when working with connection server 4.x. Primarily, the new features of Vue Composer 2.7 won't work with the older versions of connection server. This would also apply to any new functionality that appeared in Connection Server 4.5 or 4.6 when using Vue Composer 2.7 with a 4.0 connection server. Compatibility between Vue Composer 2.7 and Connection Server 4.x is provided simply for upgrade situations when they can't be done in the same maintenance period. The recommended way to upgrade is to upgrade connection servers before the Composer server anyway, so hopefully these won't ever apply. Vue Composer 2.7 is also only compatible with Vue Agent 4.5 and 4.6. So if you're running a Vue 4.0 infrastructure, it's recommended that you upgrade the agents to 4.5 or 4.6 before upgrading Vue Composer, or getting them upgraded and the pools recomposed, all within one single maintenance window. So that's it for limitations or non-compatibility, other than a general compatibility of the Vue client for both Mac and local mode to only work with 4.5 and 4.6 versions of Vue. And that limitation exists only because those features were not supported prior to 4.5. So now let's talk about the upgrade steps. Based on some of those limitations, these are the order in which you want to do everything. First of all, you want to make sure that the systems that you're upgrading are fully compatible with Vue 5. For the most part, the requirements are the same, but there may be differences that you'll want to make sure to check on. Next, you'll want to upgrade your connection servers. This includes security servers and the connection servers and all replica servers as well. Then you'll upgrade the transfer servers. After that, you'll upgrade Composer on your vCenter server, and then the agents within the parent VMs. And finally, upgrade the clients on your end user devices. So let's dig in detail to each of these a little bit more. So verifying version compatibility. First, know the supported infrastructure differences that we covered earlier in this lesson for compatibility amongst different versions of Vue components. The connection server itself went from a recommendation of 2 CPUs to 4 CPUs. The requirement is still only a single CPU though. With 5.0, Windows 2003 is no longer a supported platform unless you're running the R2 version. Otherwise, all the other requirements are the same between 4.6 and 5.0 versions of Vue. On your vSphere layer, you no longer have support for 3.5. And your update versions on 4.0 and 4.1 are increased from what they would have been for Vue 4.6. namely 4.0 must be update 3, and 4.1 must be at least update 1. With View 5, you can now have your vSphere up to 5.0, which was not possible with View 4.6. And finally, Composer will now only support Windows 2008 R2, whereas previously it was supported on both 2003 and 2008 platforms. This may require an upgrade of your vCenter server to a whole new operating system. Now let's move on to the connection servers. First of all, make sure you have your View 5 key available, because you don't want to get stuck in the middle of an upgrade and not have the key that you need in order to enable your environment. View 5 does support a different set of keys than View 4, so during the upgrade process, you will lose your licensing. Next, take a snapshot of each of the VMs that are running connection servers. Remember, VMware does recommend running View in a virtual machine. Next, in case something bad does happen and you lose some settings, you want to make sure to have them all documented before you do the upgrade. Closely related, you'll want to make sure you have a backup of the LDAP database. This can be accomplished using the VDM export.exe utility. Once that's all done, we want to stop the View connection server on all of the servers in our environment. This includes the connection server, the replica servers, and the security servers as well. You do want to make sure to leave the VMware VDM-DS service running. This is the service that supports our LDAP database, and that needs to be up and running so that the upgrade process can update the database as well. Then we can finally run the installer. During the load process of the installer, it will recognize that View is already installed on the server and simply needs to be upgraded. This streamlines the install process because most settings will just be kept. After the upgrade is complete, the service should automatically restart. But you'll want to make sure that the service did restart. And then log into View Administrator to verify the proper version. While in View Administrator, enter the View 5 license key. Once you've completed this process, stop the connection server service, and then repeat the same process on the other replica servers, ensuring that only one connection server is ever running at one time. Once every connection server in the group has been upgraded, you may start all of them at once and allow them to sync up their LDAP databases properly. Once that's completed, you can repeat this process to upgrade the security servers as well. With each security server that you bring up, will need to be repaired with its connection server. This does have the potential of leaving duplicates in the server section of View Administrator, so make sure to go in there and check for any duplicates and delete them. Now, if during your upgrade process of the View connection servers, you need to upgrade to a new server, like if you're on Windows 2003 and want to migrate to Windows 2008, or if you want to move from a 32-bit to a 64-bit system, you want to follow some specific guidelines. First of all, upgrade one existing connection server to 5.0, going through the process on the previous slide. Then build up a new connection server. Make sure it can connect and talk to the existing connection server that you just upgraded to 5.0. Then install a replica instance of View 5 on the new server and point it to the upgraded connection server. Once it's synced up, you'll be able to uninstall the connection server from the existing server. Since now all of the LDAP information is stored on the new one, then you can simply build up new replica servers within the group, pointing them to this new connection server. If the uninstalled servers still show up in the server section of View Administrator, you can run the VDM admin tool shown on the screen to remove them from the database. After your connection and security servers are all upgraded to View 5, you want to go in and update your transfer servers. Before you do the upgrade, you want to make sure to take a snapshot of the virtual machine. And then go into the server section of View Administrator and place the transfer server into maintenance mode. This prevents any new users from connecting or downloading from this transfer server. Then you can kick off the View 5 installer to upgrade the transfer server. Just like on the connection servers, it'll recognize that it's an upgrade and show you less options. Once the installer is done, make sure the transfer server service restarts. Then you can go into View Administrator and exit it from maintenance mode. Then you can upgrade View Composer. Start by snapshotting the VM if vCenter is running in a VM. Back up both your vCenter and your Composer databases, and any other databases that may be running on that server, such as Update Manager. Then make a copy of the SSL certificates folder, somewhere out on the network that you can access it later. Within View Administrator, you'll want to disable the provisioning for linked clones, and set the Refresh OS Disk on Logoff to Never. These two steps will prevent any issues with Composer trying to change the images or deploy new linked clones before our agents are updated. Then you can actually kick off the View Composer install. Now, if you're upgrading from Composer 1.0, which was released with View 3.0, you'll be asked to have the installer upgrade the databases. Technically, Composer 1.0 to 2.7 upgrades are not fully supported, but in many cases they will work. You may get a database upgrade completed with warnings dialog, which can be safely ignored. The best practice for upgrading from Composer 1.0 to 2.7 would be to use intermediate upgrades that will handle the database upgrade more gracefully. The next thing you need to look out for is the Composer port changing from port 8443, which was previously used, to 18443. So double check during the install. It will ask you which port is going to be used. And then you will have to go into View Administrator and check the vCenter server configuration to make sure it uses that port number. You'll then need to enter the vCenter password and check the Enable View Composer checkbox in order to fully re-enable Composer functionality. There are a few specific steps you'll need to go through if you're taking View Composer and vCenter from a 32-bit instance of vCenter 4.0 to the latest versions of View Composer and vCenter Server. First, you'll want to make sure to upgrade to the latest version of both Composer and vCenter that work on a 32-bit platform, namely 2.6 and 4.0. Then back up the RSA keys using the ASP.NET_RegIIS command that you see on the screen. And then copy that output to the new vCenter server. Then you'll want to stop both vCenter and Composer services on the old vCenter server. Next, go to the new vCenter server and load the RSA keys that we exported in the previous steps. Again, you'll use the ASP.NET_RegIIS command shown on the screen. At that point, you'll need to get vSphere installed on the new server. The instructions for that are well detailed out in the vSphere 5.0 upgrade guide. There are many permutations that you may have to go through here, so I highly encourage you to check out that document. Then you'll have to manually copy the View Composer database if it was locally installed on the old vCenter server. The upgrade tool will not copy this over for you. Then you'll need to create 64-bit DSNs for both the vCenter and Composer databases. Then you can run the View Composer 2.7 installer. During the install, you can point it to the View Composer database that was migrated over, using the DSN that you created in the previous step. Once that's complete, make sure all services are started properly, and then validate within View Administrator that you get proper connectivity to vCenter Server using the Composer functionality. After all your server components are upgraded, you'll have to then upgrade the agents. The agent install is fairly easy. You simply need to run the agent inside that parent VM. Once complete, shut it down and create a new snapshot. Then deploy a small test pool to verify that the agent is actually working properly. Remember that any manual pools, physical desktops, or terminal servers that you're deploying through View will need their agents updated manually. Once you've verified that the agent is working correctly, you can re-enable provisioning on your linked clone pools and set the Refresh OS Disk on Logoff to the proper setting. And then you can finally recompose your linked clone pools using the new snapshot that contains the View 5 agent. At which point you should have full functionality of the View Composer environment. Finally, upgrading your clients. If any users are using local mode, you want to make sure that their desktops are checked in. For users that are using the View client on a traditional Windows machine, you'll simply need to provide them the installer or push the installer to their desktop, which will simply perform an upgrade of the View client software. For any thin clients, you'll need to work with the manufacturer to get the latest image that they've provided that includes the View 5 agent. So those are all the steps to upgrade your environment. So now let's jump into our demo environment, where I'll show you how to do the upgrades, starting with the connection server. So here I've switched over to our View connection server. We're on the desktop. You'll see that we have the VMware View Connection Server 5.0 installation file ready to go. Looking in Internet Explorer, on the local host we have the View Administrator installed, and it is currently version 4.6. I've already taken a snapshot of this VM. In case something bad happens, we can go back to that snapshot. If for some reason that snapshot doesn't work, I've documented all the global settings and pool configurations that have already been set up in this environment. The last thing we need to do before starting our install is to create a backup of the LDAP database. We'll do that using the command prompt, where we'll switch over to the installation directory for the VMware View server under the Tools bin directory. In this directory, we have the VDM export utility. By simply redirecting the output from this command to an LDF file, we'll be able to export all of our LDAP database. And now you can see that we have vdmconfig.ldf exported out into the directory. So now we can proceed with our installation. But first, let's stop the View service to make sure that there are no open files that we need to update. Now that the service is stopped, we can continue with our install. Here we can see that the View installer has already recognized that it will be doing an upgrade rather than an installation. So let's continue. So as you can see, the installation wizard is very simple for an upgrade. There are no choices to be made. Now our install is successfully completed. It does give me a warning that due to the limited memory I've given this virtual machine, that the View components have been throttled back a bit. That's okay for my lab environment. Now let's check to make sure that the View connection service has started successfully, which we can see it already has. Now let's log back into the View administrator to check to make sure we're running the correct version. Looking in the About section, we can see it is now running 5.0. Notice that our license has been lost now. This is because the difference between View 4 and View 5 requires a new license. So let's go ahead and enter that now. Now you can see that our license expiration is never, and that we have enabled both Composer and Local Mode. So that'll complete our connection server upgrade. In this environment, we only have a single connection server. But if we had multiple connection servers, we'd have to stop the service, jump over to the next connection server, do the upgrade, and stop the View connection server service on that server once it's been successfully upgraded. We'd continue that process through all the other connection servers in our environment until they were all upgraded successfully. Then we'd bring them all up online at the same time. Next, I'll switch over to our View security server, where you can see I've already staged the View connection server installation for 5.0. Checking our View administrator, connecting to ViewCon 01, we'll see that the ViewSec01 server is still running version 4.6. So let's go in and stop our View security server service. Since the security server does not hold the database or any of the core functionality of View, we don't have any databases to back up, but I have taken a snapshot of this VM. So let's go ahead and start the install. Now that the wizard is loaded, we'll see it's detected that View has already been installed on this computer, and will perform an upgrade rather than an install. We now get to provide which connection server this security server will be paired with. It's already detected that ViewCon01 was its partner before, and we'll continue with that pairing. We now need to provide it the pairing password, which we can grab from the View Administrator. By clicking on the appropriate connection server, go under the More Commands menu and select Specify Security Server Pairing Password, where we can provide any password we like. Now that that's been defined, we can return back to our installation. We can provide it the external URLs for the security server. This will be the DNS name or IP address that users will use from externally to be able to access it. This is an address on the outside of your firewall. We'll allow it to automatically configure our Windows firewall and proceed with the installation. Now the installation has complete. Now we'll go back in and validate that the services started properly. Which we can see that it has. So now let's go into View Administrator and validate that it's reporting the proper version. After refreshing, we can see that it changes to version 5.0. So now both our connection server and our security server have been updated. So that completes our connection server upgrades. Now let's perform the upgrade to the transfer server. Here's the desktop for our transfer server, where you'll see that we already have the View Connection Server 5.0. The first thing we need to do with the transfer server is to come here into the View Administrator, select our transfer server that we want to upgrade, and click the Enter Maintenance Mode button. This will take the selected transfer server and place it into maintenance mode, preventing it from performing any operation with the local mode desktops. Now that our View Transfer Server is in maintenance mode, we can proceed with the installation. Once again, you'll notice that the installer has detected that View is already installed on the server and will upgrade rather than do an install. Upgrading the transfer server provides us another very simple install wizard, where we have no real choices to make. Here you can see that I'll need to reboot this server after completing this install. This is because we didn't stop the service before we started the install. Had we stopped the service, we probably wouldn't need to be rebooting. We'll go ahead and proceed with this and let the server reboot when we're complete. And now our transfer server has been upgraded. Now let's go ahead and reboot our server. Now that our transfer server has completed its reboot, we'll go into the View Administrator, and we can remove the View Transfer Server from maintenance mode. Sometimes these maintenance mode operations can take a little bit of time, so we'll simply need to do the refresh operation in order to update its status. So now our transfer server is ready to go again, and our install is complete. So let's move on to the next step. Now let's move on to upgrading View Composer on our Virtual Center server. So here we are on our vCenter server, where you can see I've already made a backup of the SSL directory containing the keys that vCenter uses. I've already copied down the View Composer 2.7 installer. I've also taken a snapshot of this VM and backed up the database to completely protect ourselves in case something goes wrong. Next, we need to go over to View Administrator and make sure to disable provisioning for any pools that we have that are based on linked clones. Here you'll see we have 3 different pools that are based on using Composer linked clones. So let's go ahead and disable provisioning on each one. And we also need to make sure that any desktops that users log into, and then consequently log off of, don't cause refresh operations. So we need to go into each of those linked clone pools and make sure that the refresh OS disk on logoff is set to never, at least for the time of our upgrade. Here you can see the delete or refresh desktop on logoff is set to refresh immediately. So let's go in to edit the pool. Under the pool settings, we'll come in and change refresh immediately to never, and click OK. Now the delete or refresh desktop on logoff is set to never. Next we'll repeat this on the other two pools. Let's take a look at the purchasers pool. Here you can see the refresh OS disk on logoff is already set to never. So now let's move on to the retail kiosk pool. The delete or refresh desktop on logoff is set to delete immediately. So let's go ahead and edit that and change it to never. Now that these are all complete, we have to remember to make sure and change these back to the original settings once we've completed the upgrade. But for now, we're ready to go ahead and run the installer. After what is usually a pretty slow load time for the Vue Composer installer, we can go ahead and click Next. The first information we need to provide is for the database. It's already found the original DSN that we used, and the username we used before as well. So now all we need to do is enter the correct password. We have the option of changing the current port, which we won't change here. Remember, if you're upgrading from version 1.0 of Vue Composer, this port will probably be different than what you were using before. So take that into account for any changes that may need to be made. Finally, we can proceed with the install. And now our install is complete. So we'll go ahead and finish our Vue Composer install. Next, we need to go into Vue Administrator and make sure everything's still good there. To do that, we'll go under Vue Configuration and look at the servers. Specifically, we'll look at our vCenter server that we upgraded, and click the Edit button. We can see here that it's still using the same port we had before. And it still sees that Vue Composer is installed and using our home.int domain. So go ahead and click OK to make sure that all settings are set properly. So next, let's check to make sure we're using the proper version. To do that, we'll go under the dashboard. From here, we can open up the Vue Composer servers, click on VCO1, and we'll see that the version of Vue Composer is 2.7, which is the latest release of Vue Composer out with Vue 5. Now we need to go back into our pools and reset all the settings. So in our administrative pool, we need to go to Edit, go under the pool settings, and change our delete or refresh desktop on logoff to refresh immediately. We can also go under the status and re-enable our provisioning. For our purchasers pool, we didn't have our desktops deleting or refreshing on logoff. So we'll just go in and re-enable provisioning. For our retail kiosk pool, we'll go in and edit it. And set it to delete immediately, as it was before. We'll enable provisioning again. And now our pools are reconfigured back to the way they were before. So that completes our upgrade of View Composer. Now it's time to upgrade the agent inside of our parent VM, so that we can take advantage of all the new features of VMware View 5. This is our XP Parent 01 machine, where I've already staged the View Agent 5.0 installer. There's no special requirements to prepare for this install, so let's go ahead and just kick right in. You can see that the installer has detected that the agent has already been installed on this machine, and does require an upgrade. So we'll go ahead and click Next. Here we have the ability to modify what components are installed. Notice View Persona Management is a new feature in here that wasn't here when we installed 4.6. For now, we'll leave these all as they are. And we'll click Install to proceed with the upgrade. And now the upgrade is complete. So we'll finish here and go ahead and do the restart. After View XP Parent 01 has rebooted, I shut it down, and now we're ready to take a snapshot. That'll be the basis of our new Composer pools. I'll name it View 5.0 Agent, so we know at a glance this is an updated version of the parent that contains the View 5 agent. Now that that's been taken, let's switch to the View Administrator, where we can create a test pool to test out this new agent. We'll make it an automated pool using floating desktops. Select VC01. Call it View 5 Test. We'll go ahead and leave all these settings default, since we mainly just want to test to make sure that the agent has properly been updated and that Composer can create desktops based on that image. We'll go ahead and pick our View XP Parent 01 virtual machine. And from that virtual machine, we'll choose the View 5.0 agent. Next, we'll pick the folder in which these virtual machines will be deployed to. Remember, a folder will be created under the folder we select, with View 5 Test as the name of the folder. Then we'll select Home Cluster 01 as the cluster that we'll put these VMs in. We'll select Home Cluster 01 again as the resource pool. And then select our iSCSI data store. Next, we'll change the AD container where these desktops will be placed within. we'll select the vDesktop's OU to be the place within Active Directory where the computer accounts for these desktops will be placed. Now that we've clicked Finish, we'll go back into our vSphere client and take a look at the tasks to see the new replica being deployed. Here you can see a folder has already been created. Looking in the folder, we'll see View 5 Test. And now you can see vCenter is creating our replica machine by cloning the View XP Parent 01 machine. Now that our replica has been created, you can see that clones of it are already being made. Let's switch back over to View Administrator. Where we'll take a look at the inventory for our test pool. We can see View 5 Test 1 is in a provisioning status. After clicking Refresh, you can see that the desktop is now available and running Agent version 5.0. Now that we know that the Agent upgrade has been successful, and we can successfully deploy virtual machines off of it, let's go back into our other desktop pools and re-enable their settings that we changed before. I'll start by going through the administrative pool and reset the Refresh OS Disk on Logoff and re-enable provisioning. We'll also do a recompose operation so that the pool will start to use the newest version of this agent. To do this, we'll go into the pool settings and change the delete or refresh desktop on logoff to refresh immediately, which is what this pool had set before. Now we can go in and update the status to enable provisioning. Finally, we'll go into View Composer and do a recompose operation. This will set all the existing desktops to use the latest image. We'll continue to use the same parent VM that we used before, but we'll select a different snapshot, the View 5.0 agent. We'll also use the Change the Default Image for new desktops so that the pool itself will deploy any new images using this snapshot. We don't have any users logged in, so these settings are for the most part unused. After reviewing our settings, we'll go ahead and click Finish and let our desktop pool recompose. Switching back to our inventory view, we'll see that the two desktops are already in a recompose task. Performing a refresh of this view will show that they're starting to go into maintenance mode, which will prevent any new users from connecting to these desktops. Since this recompose process places our desktops into maintenance mode, preventing any users from connecting, our pool settings will take over, where we've configured a certain number of desktops should always be available. Thus, View will deploy some virtual machines in order to take the place of any virtual machines that are in maintenance mode and therefore unavailable for end users to connect to. This process will take a little bit of time, so we'll leave it alone for now. And that's how simple it is to upgrade the View agent. Now let's complete our View upgrade by updating the View client on our end user device. On our end user device, you can see I've already pre-staged the VMware View client with local mode 5.0. So let's go ahead and run this installer. Now you'll notice here that we're using the View client with local mode. You want to make sure that you use the same client installer that you used previously. Once again, our installer has realized that we're going to need to do an upgrade rather than an install. So let's go ahead and do that. The installer has already identified which pieces we had installed previously, and will use the same settings as before. It's detected the default View connection server that we defined previously, and has picked up the settings that we used for the enhanced single sign-on feature before. we'll create shortcuts on both the desktop and the Start menu. And now we can proceed with our install. And now our install is complete. Clicking Finish and rebooting will complete the process. So that's all there is to upgrading the Vue client. A very simple install to end a long upgrade process for our Vue environment. So if you need more information about the upgrade process, these are the two documents you want to go look for. Both the Vue 5 Upgrade Guide and the vSphere Upgrade Guide, both of which have references on how to upgrade with one another. So let's wrap up with a quick review of what we've covered. We started off talking about version compatibility between Vue 5.0 components and previous versions of Vue. Then we talked about the steps that it takes to upgrade a Vue environment, starting with verifying the system compatibility with the latest version. Then we talked about what it takes to upgrade the connection and security servers, what it takes to upgrade the transfer servers. Then we talked about upgrading Vue Composer on our vCenter server, the Vue agent within our parent VMs, and the Vue client on our end-user devices. Finally, I demonstrated to you how to actually upgrade each component individually, using my lab environment. So that wraps up this upgrade lesson. Thanks for watching.